Tupac's bodyguard, Frank Alexander, thought he was speaking off the record. Turns out, someone was rolling the whole time, and what he said might have just cracked the case wide open.
Tupac's killer is dead though, but I believe this, it was definitely set up.
In this video, we're breaking down that leaked moment and the wild setup theories that refuse to die. Let's get into it. The protectors. When we talk about Pac, the legend, the poet, the actor, the voice of the streets, we usually focus on the man himself, his bars, his flow, his movie roles, and how he shook the culture. But standing in the cut just outside the spotlight were the soldiers tasked with making sure nobody ran up on him in these streets where fame and gang ties created a recipe for disaster. These were Tupac's bodyguards, the human shields who, on that fateful night in Vegas, would catch heat, take blame, and forever question if they could have done something different to save the homie. But who were the real ones actually responsible for watching Pac's back? To understand what went down on September 7, 1996, we need to know the key players who were supposed to be keeping the West Coast King safe that night. Frank Alexander, who everybody called Big Frank, was Tupac's main muscle in 1996. A former Marine and correctional officer, Big Frank linked up with Death Row Records in 1995. Built like a brick house with shoulders wider than a Cadillac and a mug that stayed serious, Big Frank was the type of presence that made fools think twice before stepping. Alexander was with Tupac during that MGM Grand scuffle, but wasn't riding in the whip with Pac and Shuge when shots rang out. Instead, Pac had Big Frank driving Kidada Jones's ride, that's Pac's girl, to transport the outlaws, Pac's crew, because they were faded, and Alexander was the only one sober enough to handle business. In his book, Got Your Back Protecting Tupac in the World of Gangsta Rap, dropped in 1998, Alexander kept it 100 about the guilt that ate him alive after Pac's murder. I went from being a hero in New York to being the brother who let Tupac get shot. I was the fall guy. Alexander believed the slugs were meant specifically for Pac, not for Shuge, and he figured the shooting was a straight get back for Pac, and then jumping Orlando Anderson earlier. Making matters worse, Alexander claimed Death Row sent goons with threats if he didn't back Shuge's story about the Anderson beat down. Another key player in Pac's security detail was Michael Moore, not the filmmaker dude. Moore's story adds another layer to why security was lacking that night. Moore got sent to Club 662, Sugar's spot, on the night of the shooting. Why? Because he refused to give up his strap. Moore said they took him off Pac's detail because he wouldn't surrender his piece, arguing that leaving Pac without armed protection was asking for trouble. He claimed Kevin Hackey, a former Compton PD officer on Death Row's payroll, had his phone that night, which meant he couldn't even communicate with the team. Moore's insistence on staying strapped got him reassigned, and later he was in his feelings about not sticking with Pac, despite what the higher-ups told him. Also, he stated that he was willing to cooperate with the police and give all the information he got. This brings us to probably the most suspect figure in the security setup around Pac, Reggie Wright Jr., the head of security for Death Row Records. Wright has caught major shade over the years for having Pac out in these streets with no armed protection on the night he got hit. Some sources say Wright told all the security to leave their heat at the crib that night, breaking normal protocol. Why would the security boss make a call like that? Some think it was because Nevada doesn't play about gun laws, while others think Wright was worried armed security might get Club 662 shut down if the cops found weapons on the spot. Wright has been denying any foul play for years, claiming Pac refused to have security in his ride and nobody could have seen the hit coming. In various interviews, Wright has expressed regret, saying, "My biggest regret is being the one responsible for not saving Tupac's life." But Wright also pointed out that Pac moved like he was bulletproof and insisted on rolling with just Shuge, which left him exposed when the shooters pulled up. When we look at the bigger picture of security for big-time rappers, especially during the height of that East-West beef, we can see that bodyguards were caught in a no-win situation. They were expected to ride for artists who often curved protection, who had ties to sets that created beef no amount of muscle could fully squash, and who moved in environments where threats could come from any direction. A 2024 piece in The Guardian broke it down, noting that rap security gets paid significantly less than the artists they protect, face physical danger, psychological strain, and catch blame when something pops off. The fact that nobody in Pac's whip was strapped that night was, looking back, a major security failure. Under normal circumstances, the protocol would have been to have an armed guard riding with Pac and Shuge, with more armed security following close behind in another vehicle. But on that particular night in Vegas, the outlaws and an unarmed security dude were in the trailing car, and nobody in the immediate vicinity was strapped and ready to bust back if drama popped off. Frank Alexander and others have said that Death Row's security team felt too safe in Vegas, partly because Shuge owned Club 662, which might have had them slipping. Plus, the fact that Death Row's security team didn't have proper permits to carry in Nevada created a logistical problem that left them vulnerable. Alexander said in a 2000 2002 interview that security was told to leave their straps in their hotel rooms or whips because of Nevada laws, a decision that left them unable to respond when shooters pulled up. This mix of being too comfortable, legal restrictions, reassignments, and Pac's own decisions about who should ride with him created the perfect storm. The security failures that night would haunt these men for decades. Frank Alexander, who wrote that book about his time watching Pac's back, would speak in interviews about how the events of that night stayed living rent-free in his head. Michael Moore would question why he got moved away from Pac's direct protection, and Reggie Wright Jr. would face accusations ranging from dropping the ball to something way more sinister, deliberate involvement in Pac's murder. Some conspiracy theories even suggest that death row insiders, including Reggie Wright Jr., orchestrated a plot to murk both Pac and Shuge to take control of death row's bag, valued at over $500 million. A controversial 1998 confession letter mentioned by journalist Chris Blatchford alleges that Wright was involved in disarming security and attending a gang summit to plan the hit. These claims ain't been proven, and Wright has strongly denied any involvement, calling such allegations straight-up slander. What we know for sure is that on September 7, 1996, the men responsible for protecting one of the world's most famous and controversial rappers weren't positioned to do so when it mattered most. Whether through circumstance, poor planning, or something more foul, the security around Tupac Shakur failed catastrophically. The sequence of events that led to those fatal shots being fired at a red light on the Strip forever changed the game for hip-hop and pop culture. The decisions made by security, by Suge Knight, and by Pac himself would all play a role in the tragedy that went down, leaving behind questions that would take decades to start answering. The night of September 7th, 1996. Las Vegas, Nevada, September 7th, 1996. Sin City was lit with excitement as the fight crowd gathered at the MGM Grand to witness Iron Mike Tyson handle business against Bruce Seldon. Rolling deep in the VIP section was Tupac Shakur, arguably the most controversial and influential MC in the game, posted up with Marion Shuge Knight, the imposing and feared CEO of Death Row Records, who had the whole industry shaking. What went down over the next few hours would become one of the most dissected sequences in music history, a chain of choices, confrontations, and security fails that would end with Pac catching hollow tips and eventually losing his life 6 days later. The night kicked off with the highly anticipated boxing match, though it turned out to be mad short for the spectators who dropped stacks of tickets. Tyson knocked Seldon out in under 2 minutes, a quick victory that had the crowd dispersing through the casino earlier than expected. This timing would turn out to be crucial, as it set up a chance encounter that many believe directly led to Pac getting murked. As Tupac, Suge Knight, and their entourage were making moves through the MGM Grand lobby after the fight, somebody in their squad spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a Southside Compton Crip. This wasn't run have, there was static already brewing. Anderson had allegedly tried to strip Trayvon Trey Lane, a mob Piru blood affiliated with Death Row, of his Death Row chain at a Foot Locker in Lakewood, California sometime before. The whole thing was caught on hotel security footage. The tape shows Pac running up on Anderson and throwing hands first, with Shuge and other Death Row goons jumping in the fade. Hotel security broke it up, but the damage was done. A public humiliation had been served to a member of a rival set, creating a situation where get back was almost guaranteed according to street code. Frank Alexander, Pac's main musical, was present during this altercation. He later recounted the tension and how quickly everything popped off. In an interview after Pac's death, Alexander described the scene. It was chaos. Tupac just went at him. It happened so fast, everyone jumped in. After the scuffle, Pac and his crew prepared to hit Club 662, a spot owned by Suge Knight. The number 662 inches on a phone keypad spells mob, a reference to the blood set that Death Row was tied to. This destination is another important detail. Everybody and their mama knew where Pac would be heading after the fight, making it stupidly easy for anyone looking for revenge to anticipate his movements. Around this time, a crucial security decision went down. Pac told Frank Alexander to drive Kidada Jones' whip to transport the outlaws, Pac's squad of fellow rappers and homies, because they had been sipping, and Alexander was the only sober one. This meant that Alexander, Pac's primary armed protection, wouldn't be in the BMW with Pac and Knight. Alexander later revealed that his strap was in his own ride, and he mentioned that Nevada law wasn't playing about carrying heat without permits, which Death Row's security team didn't have that night. This legal technicality would turn out to have deadly consequences. Michael Moore, another security dude, got sent to Club 662 because he refused to give up his burner, saying he was worried about leaving Pac unprotected. Moore claimed that Kevin Hackey, a former Compton PD officer working for Death Row, had his phone that night, which including even communicate. Moore's Sugar's insistence on staying strapped got him reassigned, and he later expressed mad regret for not staying with Pac despite orders. As the entourage got ready to bounce to Club 662, Pac made the fatal decision to ride with Suge Knight in Knight's black BMW 750 IL. No armed security rolled with them in the vehicle, a major deviation from the standard protocol for protecting high-profile celebrities, especially one as controversial and targeted as Pac. The absence of armed bodyguards in Tupac's whip was a critical factor in the tragedy. Typically, a security dude with a burner would have been riding with Pac and Knight, with additional armed muscle following close in another vehicle. However, on this night, the Outlaws and an unarmed bodyguard were in her car behind, and DeAndron, the immediate vicinity, was strapped and ready to bust back. Another crucial detail: Pac wasn't even wearing his vest that night. Normally, since he had already survived getting shot 5 times in that 1994 Quad Studios incident in New York, Pac was known to take precautions. The fact that he wasn't wearing protection has never been fully explained and represents another security lapse that contributed to the tragedy. At approximately 11:15 p.m. PDT, the convoy of cars carrying Pac, Suge, and their entourage was stuck at a red light at East Flamingo Road and Caval Lane. It was at this moment that a white Cadillac pulled up on the passenger side of the black BMW. Someone in the Cadillac started busting, letting off approximately 13 rounds from a .40 caliber Glock. Pac caught 4 bullets, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, and 1 in the thigh. Suge got grazed by a bullet fragment to the dome, but only caught minor injuries. The BMW, now looking like Swiss cheese, managed to make a U-turn and head back toward the strip before getting pulled over by cops and paramedics.
Like almost unconscious, but he was still moving, and he took his hands, just like this. He goes, and I'm kneeling down, right, trying to, talk to him and stuff. He goes, I can't breathe. He couldn't breathe.
The immediate aftermath was straight chaos. Pac was rushed to the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada, where he underwent emergency surgery. Despite the doctors putting in work, Pac succumbed to internal bleeding 6 days later, on September 13, 1996, at just 25 years old. The investigation that followed was plagued by problems from Jump Street. Witnesses, including Sugar and members of Pac's entourage, weren't trying to cooperate with the police, sticking to that no-snitching code that frustrated the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's efforts. This street code, which said that beef should be handled in-house rather than bringing in the cops, significantly hampered the official investigation. In the years following the murder, various theories popped up about why the protection around Pac had been so weak that night. Some, like retired Las Vegas police officer Chris Carroll, who was at the scene, have dismissed the idea that Suge Knight set up the hit. Carroll noted that Knight was deeply concerned for Pac, yelling "Pac, Pac" as Pac lay dying. Carroll argued that it wouldn't make sense for Knight to order a hit while sitting next to the target, given the risk to his own life. Others have suggested that the security failures were just a case of slipping rather than conspiracy. Death Row's team felt too safe in Vegas, partly because Suge owned Club 662. This false sense of security might have had them relaxing the strict protocols that would normally be in place to protect someone of Pac's status. Frank Alexander, in particular, has talked about the guilt he carried for not being in the whip with Pac when the shooting went down. In his book, he expressed the deep impact this had on his rep and mental. "I went from being a hero in New York to being the brother who let Tupac get shot. I was the fall guy." Alexander believed the bullets were aimed specifically at Pac and figured the shooting was payback for the earlier assault on Anderson. He also claimed he received death threats from Death Row for refusing to back Sugar's story regarding the Anderson beatdown, suggesting a complex web of loyalties and pressure within the Death Row camp. The night of September 7, 1996 was full of security failures that, looking back, seem almost designed to leave Pac exposed. The reassignment of bodyguards, the decision to have security unarmed, the choice to have Pac ride without protection, and even the public knowledge of where he would be heading after the fight. All these factors created the perfect storm. Whether these were just unfortunate coincidences or part of a more sinister plan has been debated for nearly 3 decades. What's clear is that the system designed to protect one of hip-hop's most valuable assets failed catastrophically that night, leading to a loss that would forever change the culture. The theories, the leads, the confessions, and ultimately the arrest that came 27 years after those fatal shots were fired on the Vegas Strip. We'll get into the role that recordings, both known and secret, played in this investigation, and how they connect to the misleading claim that gives our story its title: the investigation and the recordings. After Pac got taken out, the investigation that followed was anything but straightforward. For 27 years, the case stayed officially unsolved, leaving room for theories ranging from gang retaliation to industry conspiracies to flourish. At the heart of this drawn-out investigation was a web of recordings, some public, some on the low, that would eventually lead to someone getting knocked in 2023. Gene Deal, a former security dude for Puff Daddy and associated with Biggie. This claim came up as part of the broader narrative surrounding the unsolved murders of both Pac and Big, which have been surrounded by conspiracy theories, conflicting stories, and allegations of police shadiness for decades. Deal claimed that during an interview with Greg Kading's task force, he had no idea his statements were being recorded. He said this secret taping went down as part of the investigation into Pac's and Biggie's murders, and that he felt played by the investigative process. According to Deal, he was never shown a lineup picture of Amir Muhammad, later identified as Harry Billups, by Kading's team, despite claims to the contrary. Greg Kading, a former LAPD detective who led a joint federal LAPD task force investigating both murders, dismissed Deal's claim as ridiculous and showed Deal's naivete about police procedures. Kading explained that police often record interviews on the low with the complete consent of the law and that such practices are standard in investigations. "It's ridiculous," Kading said of Deal's claims. "It just shows his naivete about police procedures." This exchange highlights a central tension in the investigation: the distrust between witnesses, associates of the murdered rappers, and the Boys in Blue. This distrust got worse because of the Rampart scandal, which caught over 70 LAPD officers doing foul shit and gave credibility to theories that corrupt cops might have played a role in the murders or tried to cover them up. The initial investigation into Pac's murder faced major challenges from the jump. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, LVMPD, was dealing with uncooperative witnesses, including Suge Knight, who was in the whip with Pac when the shooting went down. The no snitching code meant that those who might have had valuable info weren't trying to share it with authorities. A 2002 Los Angeles Times investigation by Chuck Phillips put the LVMPD on blast for not aggressively following gang-related leads, despite evidence pointing to the Southside Crips. Critics, including editing former Las Vegas Sun reporter Kathy Scott, noted that the LVMPD's handling of the crime scene was sloppy, with potential evidence mishandled, and a lack of focus that might have been influenced by Vegas's desire to avoid bad press during its shift to a family-friendly tourism image. The breakthrough in the case came largely through the work of Greg Kading's task force, which started investigating both Pac's and Biggie's murders in the early 2000s. This team relied heavily on a taped confession from Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, obtained under a proffer agreement in 2008. Davis, a big homie in the Southside Compton Crips and Orlando Anderson's uncle, claimed he was riding shotgun in the white Cadillac during the shooting of Pac. He said that Terrence T. Brown was driving, with Anderson and DeAndre Dre Smith in the back. While Davis wouldn't straight up name the shooter, citing street code, he indicated that the shooter was in the back seat, widely taken to mean his nephew, Orlando Anderson. Davis's confession was part of a sting operation targeting info on Biggie's murder, but it provided significant details about Pac's case. According to Davis, after Pac and his crew jumped Anderson at the MGM Grand, he, Davis, was given a burner by Eric Von Zip Martin, an associate of Puff Daddy. This claim has been disputed by Gene Deal, who argued that the Crips had their own resources and didn't need Martin to supply a weapon. It's worth noting that Frank Alexander, Pac's bodyguard, is also reported to have made secret tape recordings right after Pac's shooting. These recordings, mentioned in a 2019 article by CenturyCity.News, reportedly contained discussions about what went down on September 7, 1996, and were part of a broader set of evidence, including LAPD files, FBI documents, and a 1998 confession letter given to journalist Chris Blatchford. The exact nature and content of Alexander's recordings aren't fully detailed in public sources, but they add to the narrative of covert documentation surrounding the case. The breakthrough in the case came in September 2023, when Dwayne Keefe D. Davis got knocked for Pac's murder, 27 years after the crime. His confessions from 2008 and 2009, along with public statements and interviews, a BET documentary, and his memoir, provided enough evidence for the indictment. Davis's trial, initially scheduled for 2025, was pushed back to February 9, 2026. The evidence against Davis came largely from his own mouth. After initially receiving immunity under a proffer agreement in 2008, Davis went on to repeat his confessions in various public forums, effectively waiving his protection. In his 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend, Davis wrote about his involvement in the shooting, though he was careful not to explicitly identify himself as the shooter. The delay in bringing charges against Davis has been criticized by many, including members of Pac's family and his former associates. Some have questioned why it took so long for law enforcement to act on information that had been available for years. The arrest and pending trial of Davis hasn't put an end to the conspiracy theories surrounding Pac's murder. If anything, it has reinvigorated speculation about who else might have been involved and whether the full story has yet to be told. One persistent theory suggests that Suge Knight himself was behind orchestrating Pac's murder. Proponents of this theory point to Knight's minimal injuries in the shooting. He was only grazed by a bullet, and his alleged financial motives for wanting Pac out of the picture. However, this theory has been strongly disputed by those who were at the scene, including retired Las Vegas police officer Chris Carroll. Carroll has argued that it wouldn't make sense for Knight to order a hit while sitting next to the target, given the risk to his own life. He also noted Knight's visible concern for Pac right after the shooting, describing reporting how Knight was yelling "Pac, Pac" as Pac lay dying. Another theory that's gained traction over the years is that Puff Daddy or Biggie orchestrated Pac's murder as part of the escalating East Coast-West Coast rap beef. This theory gained some credibility from Keef D's claim that he received the murder weapon from Eric Von Zip Martin, an associate of Puffy's. In October 2024, Tupac's family hired an investigator to look into potential links to Diddy, prompted by a lawsuit alleging that Diddy assaulted a woman after she suggested his involvement in Pac's murder. Gene Deal's claim about Martin not being involved contradicts Davis's account, highlighting the conflicting narratives that continue to surround the case. Perhaps the most persistent conspiracy theory is that Pac faked his death and is still alive somewhere. This theory has been fueled by the release of numerous posthumous albums and the cryptic imagery associated with Pac's Machiavelli persona. However, the medical evidence, including the severity of Pac's injuries and the confirmation of his death by medical professionals, makes this theory highly unlikely. The investigation into Pac's murder highlights the complex interplay between street culture, the music industry, and law enforcement. The reluctance of witnesses to cooperate with police, the code of silence that governed interactions within the hip-hop community, and the various competing agendas of those involved all contributed to the lengthy delay in bringing charges. The use of secret recordings, whether by police interviewing witnesses like Gene Deal or by insiders like Frank Alexander documenting their own perspectives, underscores the atmosphere of distrust and self-protection that permeated this case. Everyone, it seems, was gathering their own evidence, creating their own record of events, either to cover their own ass or to preserve what they believed to be the truth. In the end, it was Keef D's own words, recorded over years in various formats, that led to his arrest. His decision to speak publicly about his role in the shooting, perhaps motivated by a desire for clout or financial gain through his memoir, ultimately undermined the immunity he had been granted under the proffer agreement. The case remains contentious, with many questioning whether Davis will be convicted and whether his trial will finally bring closure to one of music history's most enduring mysteries. The involvement of bodyguards, both Pac's and those associated with Biggie and Bad Boy Records, continues to be a focal point of discussion, with their actions, decisions, and subsequent statements scrutinized for inconsistencies or hidden meanings. Frank Alexander, Pac's primary bodyguard, carried the weight of his absence from the BMW on the night of the shooting until his own death in 2013. His book, Got Your Back: Protecting Tupac in the World of Gangsta Rap, serves as both a personal account of his time with Pac and a means of processing his own guilt and grief. Alexander expressed guilt for not being in the BMW with Tupac, stating, "I went from being a hero in New York to being the brother who let Tupac get shot. I was the fall guy." He believed the bullets were aimed specifically at Pac and speculated that the shooting was payback for the earlier assault on Anderson. The story of Pac's murder and the subsequent investigation reveals much about the culture of hip-hop in the 1990s, the dangers faced by those who blew up within it, and the inadequacy of the systems designed to protect them. Bodyguards, caught between their professional duty to protect and the complex web of loyalties, legal constraints, and personal risks, often found themselves in no-win situations. As we wait for the trial of Dwayne Keef D. Davis, scheduled for 2026, the question remains whether justice delayed will truly be justice served. For the security who failed to protect Pac that night, for the investigators who spent decades building a case, and for the fans who have never stopped seeking answers, the outcome of this trial represents perhaps the last best hope for resolution. In a world where everyone seemed to be recording someone else, either openly or on the low, the truth about what happened to Tupac Shakur on September 7th, 1996 has remained elusive, caught up in a tangle of contradictory accounts, self-serving statements, and lost opportunities for justice.